Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining. And appreciate the coverage at the last meeting by Doug and others. Call the meeting to order a little after 7:02, looks like. Looking to see if there's anybody by public participation. You'd raise your hand or identify yourself. Seeing none. All right. Approval of some minutes. Just a reminder, if there are subcommittee meetings and there are subcommittee minutes, you should get them to myself and Steve, and we'll get them on a future agenda for review and approval. It's, even if the meeting, even if you're speaking about the subcommittee already, if there are minutes still, the minutes should come and we should approve them later. So first one is the approval of the January 26th Finance Committee library sub meeting. And that would be Dan and I think Teray. Are you the only two on that one? Yep.
Yeah, I think thought there's someone else. I thought it was a third member of our subcommittee, but I don't see Dan present.
Yeah. So we'll defer that for now. Remind me about that if I forget. But the next minutes is the meeting minutes of February 17th. It was on the link I sent. If you have a chance to look at it, or if you had any comments.
I move to accept.
Move to accept by Bill. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Who is that?
Teray.
All right.
Thank you. Any discussion on the minutes from Feb 17th, 22? All those in favor of accepting the minutes from the Finance Committee, Feb 17, 22? Anybody opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Steve, so we have a list of budgets to go over. I told the school's coming tonight to give an informal update, and I told them they'd be at the end of it. That didn't change, did it, Steve?
No, I actually talked to the superintendent tonight. I think they're planning on jumping around, closer to 8 o'clock. So we can go through the rest of the budgets.
Great. Already good. And let's see if. So we have the fire department first. I can defer. Nope, here comes Chief now. Just give it another minute. And then I can share screen if you want, or y'all can review with the packet you have. So the fire department subcommittee was led by what do you say?
Dennis
Hogan.
Dennis and Evan and Amy, right?
Yep. So from the subcommittee, any general comments and things you want to hit on? Excuse me, before I get started, sorry. Steve, in the link I sent you, Steve gave us a write-up on some of the budgets tonight. So if you hadn't had a chance to look at that, I can reference it as we go. I added it as a tab or a document, Steve's comments. So, but from the subcommittee, any initial comments for fire department?
So that would just be me tonight. No real comments, a lot of discussion about the overtime numbers. But nothing else really to note from that meeting.
Okay. Is Chief going over that? Kevin?
I think Kevin might give a brief overview and then we'll go to the chief, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
The fire department budget, we're recommending an increase of $270,144 over the current fiscal year. There's an increase in personal services, $265,644. We increased overtime by $50,000, and the balance of that, $265,644, is for contractual and negotiated increases. The contractual portion of the budget is increased $4,500. We increased the Metro Fire line item $2,500. That's used for mutual aid, and we increased the telephone line item $2,000. That is for CrewSense, which is an incident reporting software. Total budget request for fiscal '23 is $6,327,332.
Is there any other comments on the budget? Either Tom or Chief?
If you're trying to get on here, I can help you with what I can. Obviously, we should defer to him, but I can help you out if you have any questions.
Yep. From the group, anybody have comments, questions?
Is there additional headcount due to a grant?
Yes, sir. 5 additional firefighters.
Can you talk a little bit about the grant? What it covers and how the duration and stuff?
Yeah, we were able to receive a Fema grant and covers the additional firefighters 100%. Everything, salary, health insurance for a 3-year period.
Does it cover overtime?
Does not. Does not cover overtime.
And Steve, maybe it's a question for you. What about at the end of 3 years? What do you
Well,
foresee in the future?
My plan is that we would be, adding to this budget like we've done in the past. Kind of slowly, next year you'll see another probably 100,000 go in to cover those costs as we go forward, kind of ease it in, like we've done before. This FEMA grant or SAFER grant, as we call it, we've gone through a number of rounds of these. Usually we take 4 at a time. Last year we were able to add 1 and then added another 4. So that's how I would do it. I would ease it in.
But at the end of the 3 years, the headcount remains?
I would suggest that with where Wakefield is going, with the high rises, with all the new building that we have, yes, the headcount would remain, would be my suggestion
Thank
for
you.
the safety of all.
I did have, Ed. I'm
Yes,
sorry,
Chief.
excuse me. Ed, hold that, please. Doug Butler, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead. Where'd Doug go? Doug,
Thanks. Yeah.
Hey there, sorry.
thank you.
I guess this gets to the whole safer thing again. And like Steve, if you're planning after 3 years, you're gonna keep these 4 additional bodies. Look, that means over the past, 8 years, we haven't changed manning requirements really, and we've added probably 8 or 9 firefighters, and we still have an overtime problem.
Well, we
Like,
are.
Why do we even add the people if we're gonna keep having the overtime issue?
Well, a couple of things. I see that hopefully the chief was able to jump on. A couple of things. We are putting a 3rd man on another truck because he can talk better than I can. Having a truck pull up with 2 people on it makes very little sense. Well, they can't do anything. As far as the overtime is concerned, you got to remember that really the past 2 years, it's tough to look at because of the COVID. We had probably a 1/3 of that department out due to COVID or exposure to COVID or what have you over the
Oh,
last.
did you make them get vaccinated?
I would say 95% of them are vaccinated. Those that weren't had to take a test every week. So no, we did not have a vaccine mandate, so to speak.
Steve, can you hear
However,
me?
yeah, we can hear you now, Mike.
Okay, sorry about that. I had a technical difficulty here, but I have.
Well,
video
that's what
and audio
happened.
now.
Yeah.
Can you ask me the question again? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, I mean, Mike, we've been, in the past 7 or 8 years, we've added, what now, 9 firefighters through SAFER. And
Yeah, okay.
they're largely, and they've, each time it's been with this promise of like, oh, we're gonna add these people and then we're not gonna get hit with as much overtime, or we keep adding firefighters, and now you're adding sort of a 3rd man on a truck, which is fine, but the 3rd man on the truck is not beneficial other than for fires. And again, I hate to break it up, but you go on a fire call every 2 weeks.
Yeah, Doug, can I respond to some of that, please?
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, no, go ahead, Chief. Yeah.
first of all, the overtime costs that we are incurring both last year and this year have very little to do with the Safer Grant, okay? They are clearly placed on COVID, okay? A lot of things happened both this year and last year that I would never have dreamed of happening before that. COVID, Steve had mentioned that close to a third of the department at any one, not at the same time, but during the course of COVID came down with it. We had many more instances where people were exposed to close contacts to COVID and had to be quarantined. All of those instances resulted in overtime. We had 3 long-term injuries last year and unfortunately a death due to cancer. All 4 of those were out for most of the year, and that significantly affected COVID. Okay, let me respond to the third man in a ladder truck. Okay, the third man in a ladder truck is not. It is obviously beneficial if we have a fire, Doug. No, that's no argument there. But running 2 men on a ladder company and sending them out on calls, we do 3,000 medical aid calls, and a lot of those calls are serious. There's cardiac arrests, there's opiate overdoses, there are COVID cases, and we need the extra pair of hands both to make sure that the crew is safe, they're taking the proper precautions, they have enough help to get the equipment that they need out to the patient. There are many, many reasons why we need 3 men in a ladder truck.
On medical aid calls, just so I can understand for my edification, where I guess I'm confused, is you're gonna have 3 ladder guys and then you're gonna have 2 people in the ambulance because it's the ambulance that takes whoever it is away for the medical aid call. So we got 5 people and you're saying the 4 isn't enough.
Well, you're right, there would typically be a 5-person response on a medical aid call. That's assuming that the ambulance arrives at the same time that we do. We very consistently beat the ambulance there. I'm sure you've noticed in the news that there's been a very, very significant shortage of EMTs out in the private ambulance community. We are having to wait longer for ambulances to come, and having the 3rd person to get the equipment up and start patient care is very, very important.
And can I jump in, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Yeah, well, hold on. Ed, did you have a question or to add something? I stopped you a
Well,
minute ago.
yeah, I was, it was on the, some of them have been answered on the overtime. Chief, I saw some allusions towards the age of the workforce. I know that longer people serve, probably there's more vacation time, and then overtime is precipitated by vacations or whatnot. Is that correct?
Well, yes, benefits, paid leave does affect overtime, yes.
Right. So I know that's a problem in some places. Is there a minimum manning requirement per fire company in Wakefield?
Yes, we're at 11, and that results in 3 3-person companies, 2 3-person engine companies, and 1 3-person ladder company. The captain's in a command car, an overall command of the shift, and we have a dispatcher.
Right.
That will make the 11 minimum.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the overtime problem is not just germane to Wakefield with the fire departments because of the nature of firefighting and the close quarters. The COVID pandemic has hit the fire departments very hard, not just in Wakefield, but throughout the state. I think that's safe to say.
Yes.
Thanks. So, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing, and maybe the chief can talk a little bit about the number of calls that have really jumped over the last number of years. But I got to say that having someone who was the recipient, I hate to make these things personal, but the recipient of one of those medical aid calls not too long ago, beginning of October, I will tell you that the people who stabilized me was the fire department. And then the ambulance came later. So I was quite grateful that they were there to stabilize me and not to broadcast it later on, particularly. But I think calls have jumped tremendously over the last number of years. So maybe Chief can give some of the numbers there.
When I took over in 2008 as chief, we were doing about 2,700 calls a year. We're up at 4,000 as we speak. I don't see those calls diminishing. If anything, I anticipate them to continually go up, maybe 3 to 5% a year. With all the development and all the residential development that's going on, we are going to see a consistent increase in emergency responses.
All right, so I have a question then on, you know, the head count, the Fema Grant, and no crystal ball here, but is it reasonable to assume if we don't have a COVID-2 or whatever, that we might have a staffing level at a point? I know there was a cancer and a death in there's situations, but the head count is in a good place, Chief, to help with the overall overtime budgetary issues?
Jim, the problem has always been that in order to achieve the forecasted overtime that I put in the budget every year, we have to maintain our 4 groups. It was 4 groups of 12. Now it's 4 groups of 13 with an 11-man minimum.
Right.
You know, so if I can get to that point, and I will point out that since I've been chief, it's been a continuous line of new hires since I've become chief, and it
Right.
makes it very frustrating, especially when you have a long wait time for the fire academy and getting them in and getting them trained. We have done pretty good with getting them trained as EMTs. They have these new 30-day programs now where we can get them in, and you can come out state certified in 30 days, which is huge.
Yep.
But the fire academy still remains backed up. COVID definitely played an impact on that. But to answer your question, if we were to attain a level of 4 groups of 13, then the forecasted overtime that I have in my budget, yes, I think we would have a very realistic chance of keeping within those limits.
Right. And again, now there's an additional man, but the minimum staffing is still the same, correct?
No, we were at 12 and we had 4 groups of 10. The grant, the SAFER grant, allowed us to hire 4 firefighters. We actually hired 5. We replaced one member that retired. So
Right.
we had 5 that we hired this year. And that was written to bring the staffing on the ladder truck up to a 3-man crew.
Okay, understood. Good.
So is it safe to say, Chief, that you can't hire new firefighters without an academy? In other words, you got to wait for the academy before you put them on the rolls, correct? Or can you do some in-house training?
That's correct. We used to do in-house training, and that was negotiated out of the contract 2 contracts ago.
Oh, really? Okay.
Dawn?
Yes, Chief, a couple of questions. So in the section of the salaries where you have 2 people listed, that's basically the second person is filling the role formally of the first person. Is that correct? Is that how that works?
I'm not, can you try that again? Because I didn't get it the way you phrased
Okay.
it.
So in the listing of salaries, so for instance, you have on one line, you have Robert Taggart and Samuel Carr, lieutenant to firefighter.
Oh, okay.
So do I understand that Robert Taggart was the original salary and the new salary listed is for Samuel Carr? That is.
Yes, that's accurate. So we had 4 people leave the ranks of the department. 1 passed away and 3 retired. And that was a way to reconcile the budget so that it made sense and equaled what was expended last year.
Okay.
Right.
And my second question is, you have 2 open firefighter positions, and
We
you
do.
have those budgeted beginning July 1st. Is the expectation that you will have those positions filled by July 1st?
Well, we're going to try to fill them as soon as we can. The list is coming out March 15th. Civil Service froze the present list because they changed a policy where they now offer the exam annually. And we were told we couldn't call for a list until March 15th, but on March 15th, I will be calling for a list for 2 firefighters with Steve's permission. And we will move as fast as we can, depending upon the backlog in the academy, to get them through all their required testing and get them through the academy and then get them on the job. Yes.
Okay, so if you're successful, then the salary will be as indicated in the budget here. If you're unsuccessful, we'll likely see overtime to cover those positions. Is that how it?
Yes, yes, until we get them filled. Yes, there would
Yes.
potentially be some
Okay.
overtime. Yep.
Okay.
Good.
And for all the COVID-related absences, were we able to get federal funding to cover any of that, Steve?
Yes, last fiscal year, we did get federal funding. And I believe this year we're trying for FEMA funding. Am I correct, Kevin?
We are trying for FEMA, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's not looking too good.
Although I read in the item tonight, they're giving FEMA funding for overtime and whatnot in the MBTA. So we're going to try again. This year it looks a little tougher. Last fiscal year was a little easier for it.
Last year, we got 400,000, or at least that's what I was reading in the overtime account.
Okay.
Dawn, anything else?
So is that 400,000, is that reflected in the actual somewhere as an offset, or is it?
That was last fiscal year.
That's correct.
So that was fiscal year 20 or 21?
21.
21.
Doesn't that end June
22.
30th?
22 ends June 30th.
22 ends June, that's
Yeah.
right, I'm sorry.
I know, I have to think too all the time on that.
We got that money
What
at
year
the
am
end
I
of
in?
the fiscal year. We got that money, just FYI, we did get that towards the end of the fiscal year. So I was hoping that we would get another FEMA reimbursement.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you, Chief.
I just had one question on the educational incentives or reimbursement. It's only half spent this year. Is that a trend? It's been budgeted again.
It's paid out weekly, Jim. It's
Okay.
part of there's a little bit that comes out every warrant.
Got it. Thank you. Ed, you're all set, it looks like. Doug Butler?
Hey, just another question around, could you walk us through the EMT line item? So that jumping from 246 to 270 to 318, and now we're at 384. Like, why is it jumping 70 something, 70 grand or so?
The last contract that was negotiated, they negotiated an increase in the stipend. The stipend goes up roughly 1% a year for the 3 years of the contract. So for instance, paramedics in the first year of the contract, we're in the third year now. Paramedics in the first year of the contract would have got 8% of base pay. Last year was 9%. This year is 10%. EMTs, same thing, only 1% lower, so 7, 8, 9%. And then we have a couple of first responders that are not EMTs, and they would have gone 6, 7, and 8%. So there's an increase in the stipend. There's an increase in the number of EMTs in the department because of us hiring the 4 additional firefighters. That accounts for probably 95% of it right there.
It's just that's like, you know, Steve, and that gets to your guys' negotiating style in terms of that's, you know, that's a hidden $140,000 that probably this group never saw coming with your contract. And that, like, and I don't know if we saw it coming either, but that sort of escalation is not something that, like, that's something that gets hidden with these 2.5s. So I just caution us next time, since this is contract is next year again.
It
Yes,
expires June 30th.
2000.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that
2023.
this,
Sorry, yeah.
you know, I just wonder, did we get rolled last time around for this?
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Well, it looks that way.
Anybody else? Chief, deputy, thank you.
Thanks. I apologize for the technical difficulties there.
Thank you, guys.
You made it. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Animal inspector, Steve,
Sure.
Kevin, sorry, whoever.
Steve, do we want to do animal or do we want to go to the,
Why don't we keep in
Okay.
order? These shouldn't take long. Make them wait.
okay. Animals inspector budget, we're recommending that this budget be level funded for fiscal 23. We did increase contractual services $1,500 based on current year expenses. We decreased sundry charges $1,500. We're now splitting the cost of the dog pound rental fee with Reading. Total budget request for fiscal 23 is $40,600.
Okay. Comments, questions? Very good, Kevin, thank you. And parking. Be next.
Parking, we're recommending that this budget be decreased $168 over the current fiscal year. There was an increase in personal services, $332, which is for contractual negotiated increase. And we decreased contractual services $500. Most of those expenses under contractual services now flow in the police department budget. Total budget request for fiscal 23 is $12,782.
Go ahead, Doug. Where'd you go, Doug?
He's on mute.
Doug, you on mute still?
How much,
Do you have a comment?
how much did we get in parking revenue last year for this position that was supposed to pay for itself?
You're comparing it to the wrong position.
Yeah,
That was for the parking, the people giving out the tickets, which was in the police budget.
Right. No. I'm not, this is not, I want to know from our parking clerk. This is part of, isn't this part of the whole parking department? That's part of the, granted, the paying of the people is through
Right.
police. What did we
No,
collect in parking
There's
revenue?
a separate department. They handle the processing of the and payment of the tickets. They don't do anything, and the appeals of the tickets. They don't handle out any tickets.
Even
But
better. So how
Right.
much revenue did they handle last year?
I will tell you in fiscal year 21, a total of 21,750 here and another 17,000 that was collected through the registry. So that's 38, I guess. This year to date, 11,100 here and 15,686 through the registry.
But Steve, I think you have to look back at fiscal
Right.
20. The past couple of years, we've been dealing with COVID. If you go back to fiscal 20, there was the big issue with downtown parking. And that's when we brought on the enforcement down there. We hired a couple people. In fiscal 20, we collected over 72,000 in parking violations and another 25,000 from the registry of motor vehicles. So we're up almost $100,000 pre-COVID. That eventually I would anticipate getting back closer to those levels than where we are right now.
very good. Anybody else? Okay, Health and Human Services Department. And there was a write-up in the information that I did provide. FYI. Who wants to speak first on that?
Was there, the town hall subcommittee want to speak on this first?
Sorry,
before I-
yep.
I think that would be, Teray jumped in first.
Yes, so I do, so I'm just looking at my notes from that meeting. I think this was obviously the budget where there was a lot more discussion. I know that I had raised some questions about the new positions that are being added. They seem to be prudent, and I think the health director is going to talk a little bit about it. But you know, the fact that there are multiple positions being introduced at the same time, there was some discussion about whether you know, sort of what's required and whether there can be some combination. It doesn't seem like there could be after having that conversation, but I suspect that members of this committee is going to, you know, make the same inquiries of Anthony today. But overall, after we had that conversation, I generally found the approach to be prudent, but I did, of course, you know, it raised the flag for me when I saw multiple new positions being created. I don't know if anyone else on the subcommittee have any further comments.
Yeah, so at least to the Wakefield Health and Human Services, I know cost is definitely going to come into play. I know ARPA, we're using a good amount of funds. I'm trying to find my notes in terms of how much we are getting. I think it's 145,000. So we are offsetting a large portion of it this year. I know in the meeting I did bring up paying for it in future years and how it will affect the tax levy. Again, I have no objections to the positions, but you know, that is something that we do want to call out. That's all for me.
Thank you. Do we want department heads to speak, or do you guys have questions now? Bill or Ed, do you have questions now?
The question I had was, you know, probably best for Steve. Is there any synergies with this department, with the two positions that exist in the police department to handle?
I think Anthony will talk about that. It is going to be very synergistic, and it's really going to enhance and work together with those. So absolutely, yes, but they are needed in addition, in my opinion.
And will they report to? I mean, these people now kind of, I guess, report to the chief, right?
Remember this, the chief, those are positions that do report to the chief, although they work very closely with the health department, or Health and Human Services Department. So they, yes, they'll continue to stay in the police department for now. We may go down the road, make that change, but I see this as really a synergistic working together. Remember the social services coordinator, and Anthony will go into this and I think probably answer it all in his comments.
Okay, I'll wait. I apologize. I just, you know, just
It's not a clinical social worker that'll be in the health department. So there will be synergy.
All right, you want Anthony to go through first, or Kevin, what's your pleasure?
Why don't I go through first and then I'll turn it over to Anthony?
Thank you.
The Health and Human Services budget, we're requesting an increase to this budget of $106,053 over the current fiscal year. Under personal services, the increase is $116,572. Has contractual and negotiated increases included. There are 3.5 new positions, one half-time position that was reclassified out of the professional services line item. If you look at page 5 of the budget, listing the new positions, we have a new chief operating officer. That's funded half through the tax levy and half with ARPA funds. We have a new health inspector. That's half new, and the other half was what was reclassed out of the professional services line item. We have a new assistant part-time health nurse. We're going to fund that 100% to ARPA. And there's a new social services coordinator. This is a full-time position. It's going to be funded 100% to ARPA year one. Under contractual services, there's a decrease of $12,397. That decrease is because we reclassified the health inspector from the professional services line item over to the salary portion of the budget. We also removed there was a CARES offset. We used some federal funds last year when we increased the public health nurses' hours. Total budget request for fiscal 23 is $383,076.
Anthony.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kevin, for going over all the changes. So I'm going to address some of the bigger changes and then also explain a lot of the positions that we're looking to add. So one of the bigger changes that we are proposing were the travel inside the Commonwealth categories. This was increased from 860 to 2,000. This was in line with some of our potential new positions as well as our existing positions. We want to make sure that we have staff that are well trained and that are keeping up to date with the newest information. Make sure that they have the resources to continue to do their job well, and for us to work on programs that will help benefit the community moving forward. So for the new positions, I'm going to go over them. So in terms of the new Chief Operating Officer position and the Human Services Manager, that is our existing employee, Catherine Dingra. She has been working in the prevention realm for the last 8 years. She's been absolutely instrumental to us bringing these services to Wakefield. Lots of these programs are now self-sufficient, and she helps to guide these. One of the things that we're looking for in terms of being responsible stewards of the budget for the town is that we want to make sure these positions are evaluated on a regular basis. And so as part of her human services manager duty, she'll also be helping with the evaluation pieces. She'll be looking to help us compile metrics that will be able to measure our positions to see what the output is, how efficient they are, and help us to make decisions whether or not positions are sustainable and whether they're required for us to keep around. And so this is hopefully going to help explain why some of these positions are being put into place. The next position is the Assistant Public Health Nurse position. This is one of our efforts to start going above the minimum statutory requirements. We want to make sure that we're able to provide the community with other services other than just clinics. We have flu clinics, we have the public health nurse attending camps and making sure that all the registrations and immunizations are up to date. But we can go one step further. There's a lot of education pieces, working with the school nurses, working with other community partners. We can really be more integrated with the community. We can work on blood pressure clinics. Obviously, during these last few years with COVID, it's been kind of an upside down kind of environment for everybody. And I think the assistant public health nurse will really help us push forward our mission to increase community awareness and really provide services for all the different populations that we have. The social services for last health inspector position. So this is not necessarily a brand new full-time health inspector position. This is we already had a half-time shared with the city of Melrose. And so part of our goals here for the health inspector to be added to Wakefield, to have one full dedicated one for Wakefield, is because we're looking to do more than the minimum statutory requirements, which is do the inspections for each restaurant once a year. We want to make sure that we can move to a risk-based model where food establishments that are deemed higher risk or larger in capacity, those will receive more inspections. That's kind of the direction that the FDA code is moving towards now. And so with our current staffing capability, we're not able to do that. We are just barely able to meet the minimum requirement for inspecting restaurants. And so we also have an increasing number of complex housing inspection cases that we've been seeing. And so our housing inspector is required to go out to these calls, and these calls are generally not as simple as just going to issuing an order to correct. These calls are becoming more and more complex, and they require kind of a multifaceted approach. And so we do see the need for an additional inspector, both for us to establish a food safety program rather than just an inspections program, and also for those housing cases, which leads me to the next position, the social services coordinator. This position is imagined to be working as part of a team. I believe, Bill, you were the one that asked the question before. So this would work with the existing police position as well as the social worker at the COA. And so we're really looking for this position to be the follow-up that many of our community members need in terms of after the initial contact, whether that's a call from police, whether that's a call from fire, if that's an inspection, we can then have this individual follow up with a lot of cases. I'm going to make the example of the recent fire we had on Audubon Road. So far, when we responded to that, we had an inspections. Our health inspector went out there, did the initial inspection, but there were so many displaced individuals that our team cobbled together a response where we were able to find a resource for them, follow up with them, make sure that they received, in conjunction with emergency management, they received everything they needed to recover and eventually return to their units. However, with this social services coordinator in emergency events, this would be something that would be covered within their job. They would have a strong understanding of community partners and resources in surrounding areas that they can help coordinate care for these individuals, almost like a case manager in some senses. This would help recovery from emergency events, as well as events that are not emergencies. These are cases that we discover through the routes that I just described, but they would be able to take on cases that are passed through the COA, passed through police. They would be able to do the warm handoff to different services. So we see this as an essential service, and with the expected rise in mental health needs, as well as behavioral health and substance use potential after this pandemic starts to wane down, we're looking to go into recovery mode here, and we're seeing these as essential positions, especially for the community, as they need to access resources.
Can I just ask, Jim, while we're on this topic of the question I asked that Anthony's addressing, the new positions, are they going to be based in the town hall?
Yes, all the ones I've described are based in town hall under the health department,
And
under
would
health
you-
and human services.
Would you expect that the two positions in the police department would remain over in that building, or would they also be with the team at the town hall?
I'm going to let Steve answer that one. We haven't really discussed that.
Yeah, I think right now they'll remain at the police department, more for space than anything else. However, during the construction, we may bring them over and they might stay. So that is a possibility.
I mean, I've learned from being involved at the subcommittee, those positions generate a fair amount of traffic into that building.
Yeah.
So,
And I do think that the clinician that goes out with the police on the police calls may be a little bit different than the ones that we're talking about. So they might stay there for a while. Well, it's a good suggestion, Bill. We'll have to take a look at it.
yeah, I'm just kind of curious how that aligns. The other thing, Jim, if it's okay, just while I'm on a roll here, I find it's not a big deal, I guess, the title of Chief Operating Officer to be a bit peculiar. Not aware of any other towns, town departments that have. It's a lofty title in the business world.
That's gonna change. It's probably a misnomer. So
Okay,
probably
I didn't know if part of the reason I'm asking is that sort of precedent in other towns that that role has that kind of title. It seems a little
So
much to me.
we're gonna be working with Steve to fix that.
I mean, I view Steve as the Chief Operating Officer.
I will say titles are not my expertise.
Yeah. Okay. It just, well, I read it in the paper tonight,
Yeah.
when I was looking at this, and it just struck me as, I don't know, you could open up a can of worms given different roles, different titles like that throughout the town, I think. Anyway, that's all I have, Jim. Thank you. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Anthony, are you done with your overview?
Yes.
Dawn, you have some questions?
Yeah, sure. So I probably should have asked this in the subcommittee meeting, but as these come to us, they kind of, we have the positions in the police department, we have the positions here with the Board of Health. And we also have the emergency services position, I believe. And then we also have resources in the schools too. So in real life, is there more coordination than we see as we look at these budgets in a siloed manner?
Yes, so I would say this position would work closely with the schools as well. That's one of the things I failed to mention was the schools. We would imagine this and we'll work closely with Doug and the other school administration team. We want to make sure that we can be available to follow up. So if students are having trouble, their first point of contact, or families would have trouble would make their first contact would most likely be with the schools. But as the schools, deal with the kind of changing landscape here, there's another resource for us to be a follow up. And so they could pass cases on to us when we have, community resources to turn to bring to them. And so we imagine that that's going to be part of the work for the social services coordinator.
And the emergency services director position, is that
you're referring to the emergency management director?
Emergency management director, right?
He's really, or that position really is not, other than maybe securing some resources on if there's a fire or something like that in the beginning, the social services aspect is not something that he's going to be involved in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ed?
So I guess a question for Steve and Kevin on the financing plan here. I guess the goal here is to bridge with ARPA and thus reducing the impact on the general fund. So my understanding is that you can bridge up until December 31st of 2024. So the full impact of these positions would be on the general fund as of January 2025. Is that correct?
I think that's in a nutshell, yes, but I do believe if it's already appropriated as such, you could extend that payment through the end of fiscal year 2025.
Yeah, I have an opinion. Yeah, just so you know, I have an opinion from outside auditors that say differently, to say two.
Oh, okay, all right. Can you share
I'll
that
share
with
that
me?
with you, Steve.
Yeah, because that's not what the MMA says, but that's okay.
Yeah, I got this from Clifton Larson Allen
Okay.
yesterday, so.
But
So I was hoping it'd be 2026, but
yeah.
yeah.
My intention would be, what is this? This is 145,000, right, of ARPA funds being used.
Yeah.
So, next year you hit half of it, the year after that you hit half of it. So it is
Right.
kind of seed money to go in. That's
Right.
exactly it. As you said, to bridge the gap.
Yeah, and this is clearly appropriate because this is a major category in ARPA, public health and public safety. So it's clearly eligible. It's what ARPA is designed to do, I think.
Although unlike Somerville, Wakefield got less than 10 million, so we have a little bit more latitude.
We got 77 million.
I know,
I don't know what to do with it.
Send some our way.
Yeah, right.
Steve, I could tell him, remember I told you how we could handle it,
Yes,
right?
I know. I'm not going to share that publicly, Jim.
Excellent. Ed, you're all set, I think. Dan? Good evening.
Oh, wait, actually, do you mind if I jump in just to add to Ed's question? So I think I may have said this to town council already, but there's legitimate concerns about these positions, right? So ARPA originally was for the COVID response and public health. But to be responsible with this, we're also, we have a great track record in the health department for getting grants that service a lot of these. And so we would consider this to be somewhat of seed money, right? This would give us the opportunity to go out and get bigger grants. And, foreseeably, we could see some of these positions being offset or being fully funded at some point by grants in the future. So just to keep it in mind.
Great, thank you. Dan?
Yeah, good evening. Sorry for my tardy arrival. I'm really confused about this budget. I think maybe Kevin's the one to answer it. So if I'm looking at the top page, personal services, $186,000, which includes the discount for ARPA.
Correct.
So it's gonna go, up from 225 up to 331. And then in terms of that total, then you got social services added to that. So now you're looking from 277 for this year to 383. But then when I jump over to the allocation sheet, the total in column H is 300,000, not 383,000. So where'd the other $83,000 go?
Dan, where are you looking on the allocation sheet?
Allocation sheet, column H, total.
And what's that total? I don't have to call.
It's 300,000.
Yep.
And so there's $83,000 missing before the allocation between Melrose and Wakefield.
Yeah,
And if you-
that 383 is totally different. That allocation sheet and that 300,000 allocated breaks out. If you look all the way to the right on that allocation sheet, you'll see professional services total of $132,749.
Yeah,
If you look on page 2 of the budget under contractual services, and you look at the professional services line item,
well, wait a minute, Kevin, you're allocating 300,000 between Melrose and Wakefield. So is Melrose picking up the $83,000?
Melrose is picking up more than that. Yes, correct. You're right.
So we're picking up 130,000, 820,000 out of the 383. That's what you're saying?
And the 83,000 is Anthony's payment from Melrose. We owe him the rest.
Correct.
Correct.
83,000 is Anthony's payment.
Melrose pays 65% of his salary, so that's the 83,000 that we're missing, or that you're potentially missing there. And Hope and Lowry, I guess, are not in our budget anymore, would be my guess, because now they're being full-time positioned, right? Is that the way I'm thinking about it? Sorry, guys.
So I guess the bottom line is the Wakefield portion of the Board of Health is dropping from 151,000 down to the 130.
Correct, because Melrose is picking up more of Anthony's salary. It's not split evenly, correct? That Melrose is picking up more of Anthony's salary.
Okay, so if our portion is dropping from 150 and change to 131 and change, or 130, does that affect the services that Wakefield is getting?
No, they haven't in the past.
No, because they're hiring new people to cover that.
I get that. I mean, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, but
Yeah,
that's what I'm looking at.
It was
We're
always at
getting more
65.
services.
Dan, it was always at 65.
Well, that may be,
Yeah,
but our portion is going down from 150 and change down to 131. So my only concern is does that include, a cut in services, but you're telling me it won't?
it won't, because that include, and jumping, if I'm wrong, Kevin, in previous years, that also included that health inspector position.
Correct.
And that's going to be our complete on personal services, not on contractual.
That's correct.
Okay. So I think I heard you say that the ARPA funds, we thought were going to cut in half for
That's what I would, yeah,
for 24, and then another, half again, and then 25, and then go away.
and then it would have been, it would be, then it would be all in the tax levy.
Right. So then that would mean the 140,000 we're getting for ARPA funds will drop down to 70 to 35 and then 0.
Correct, or
So
something like that. Yeah.
Those decreases in ARPA funds will turn into increases in our portion based on the 65% formula?
No, the 65 formula will stay. The ARPA funds are just gonna go towards our costs. As long as we have that agreement with Melrose, that, unless they're watching this meeting and you change their mind, that 65 will stay with us, will stay.
So you're saying that when ARPA drops from 140 and change down to 70, our budget, our portion is gonna go from 130,000 to 200,000?
Where's the 130 coming from?
Yeah, page to the allocation sheet.
All right, so the allocation sheet, you should just really be looking at contractual services. That's not gonna change. If I'm not mistaken. On personnel services, that's where that will really pick up.
Contractual services, I guess that's to the right.
Yeah.
That's the line
So-
item.
Yeah, so I guess, so the bottom line is when, I think I'm hearing this, when ARPA goes from 140 and change down to 70, our portion of the budget's gonna go up by the 70,000, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, I mean, that's
Unless
what
we
we're driving
find
at,
grants and things like that.
because, what I'm trying to figure out, it was in terms of for Wakefield, it's gonna look weird that our budget goes from 150 and change for 22, 131 for 23, and then 200 in 24.
I don't think the allocation with Melrose for the contractual line is not really gonna change. For our ARPA is not included in that. That'll go along organically. That'll go the normal way it goes.
Okay, let me rephrase my question, and I guess this is for Kevin. Can you do these numbers for 24 and tell me what's going to happen for 24 and 25 on the Board of Health, assuming normal inflation? Because
well-
I'm looking at this and I'm saying I have no idea what to put in for the Board of Health as an estimate for 24 and 25 based on this conversation.
I think we
I-
can, Kevin. I think
I would say it's probably gonna be like 3.5% plus $70,000.
Okay, and that's what I was driving at. So then the following year, it's
Would
going
be
to
the
be
same, would be the same thing.
3.5% plus 30,000 or 70?
Plus another, no, plus another 70, because I think probably the ARPA funds will probably go from 140 this year to 70 next year to 0 the year after.
Okay, all right. Well, I can handle that. You don't have to do any more. I will plug in the 70,000 increases for the next 2 years in my forecast. Thank you very much.
Very good. Doug, do you have any?
Yeah, I'm not sure, great, Dan, that you're super comfortable plugging that in. I'm not sure I can support this budget at all. This is you're moving personal services in 1 year from $70,000 to, let's ignore the ARPA money, because let's say it goes away. I think ARPA money really should be temporary money, like money that you're using to solve a temporary problem. Moving a budget from 70,000 in personal services to 331 or 332. That's a big change that and Anthony came in talking about the increase in travel budget. Sure, you can travel wherever you want for $300,000 that we're spending more. And I guess the other things that I'm confused about, Anthony, and you can sort of talk me through this.
Oh, wait, before you can continue, the travel inside the Commonwealth is actually it's kind of a misnomer. That one actually is the training budget. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't
just
care. It's $1,200. Do whatever you want. We're adding 4 positions after a giant health crisis. So maybe we're solving for something. It's 2 things. One is we're keeping that seat. We're paying for half the senior health inspector in Melrose, and we're going to have our own health inspector. How many health inspectors does Melrose have? Because they sure have a lot more restaurants and such. So that's my question. And in terms of that position, feels like, what are we? Is Or should there just be one health inspector for each of them, each of us? I mean, having 3 health inspectors feels like a lot. Or does Melrose have 1.5 now?
So Melrose has 1.5.
Okay, so we just
So-
have a half.
Okay, historically, we've had the senior health inspector shared, and then we've had one health inspector shared. So essentially it was one in each town if you're counting the hours. We're introducing we're moving the health inspector position traditionally split now back to Melrose. So there would be 1.5 in Melrose and 1.5 at Wakefield. That's the proposal here.
So we're essentially adding a half a position here. I'm sorry, is Longo a health inspector? Is that what he or she is?
No, she's our administrative assistant.
Okay, and then Catherine Dingra she doesn't have a
Catherine
salary or
Dingra-
anything listed here, so I'm confused as to like how does she not make anything currently and we're moving her into a paid position?
No, so she's currently our substance abuse prevention coordinator. She is currently fully grant funded. Not ARPA funded.
Right, she's not ARPA funded, she was grant funded and the grants run out, so we're deciding to keep her on and move her to this new position.
Well, she's actually funded by the Drug Free Communities grant, and that doesn't end for 2 more years. We're bringing her in because her scope will be outside of just.
Are we?
She will continue to be.
The rest of the money that she's getting for the grant, is she going to continue doing that job or are you hiring someone for that position?
So we're looking to hire someone in the grant position. So this new position is the community services manager. They'll be fully DFC funded. They're not going to be funded by the town.
I mean, Steve, I don't know. I've never seen this sort of expansionist policy done. I mean, I've been here 10 or 11 years. This is bigger than most.
This is,
And you're using ARPA money for what you think are going to be permanent positions, which I thought we had a position on that.
I think it has been, well, we use grant money and Safer Grant. I know you don't like that either. And then we fund them. So that's not unprecedented. But we do feel that there's a great need for these positions.
For all of them?
Yep. And particularly in the area of mental health, social well-being of the community. And that was just highlighted because of the COVID situation. And I will tell you that this has been something that's been talked about and requested by the town council for years. One of them told me that 5 years ago she wanted these positions. And
so which of those positions, Steve?
And I'm looking at
the health inspector. Is it the public? Which positions are you talking about?
Talking about the assistant public health nurse and the social services coordinator.
Okay, fine. Why do we need another health inspector? I don't know that we do.
Well, we're adding up, you mean a part-time health inspector?
No, you're paying her.
We
I
have
don't know if the health
now,
inspector
Doug.
makes 125 grand, so I don't think so. You're paying for a full-time health inspector. That new position there, you're adding it.
We have a half shared position now on that position with Melrose. We're adding half a position for that. So that half position with Melrose is going away.
And they didn't come to you for an assistant public health nurse anytime before COVID happened. I mean, I guess that's my other thing is you're closing the barn door.
We're gonna disagree. I will tell you that the council voted for it, so recommend against it, Doug. That's your right.
Right, no, I totally think so. And I know, of course, the council voted for it. I mean, what are they gonna do?
Yeah. This has been, there's a great need for public health.
This is an epic land grab by Health and Human Services.
I don't think so.
I think it is.
Okay.
So as far as the positions go in the write-up by Anthony, there's 2 full-time and 2 part-time on the last page, correct? I'm looking at the write-up. So there's, but you said in the beginning, there's 3.5.
Were you referring to the social services coordinator? So that's the full-time health inspector is full-time. And then
the part-time assistant Go ahead.
The public health nurse assistant is part-time. The community services manager, I only included, but that's actually a DFC position, so it doesn't actually impact town budget. That was just for context.
Okay.
So it's actually two, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 2 full-times and 1 part-time, is that correct?
And I jotted down 3.5 in the beginning of the discussion. That was all.
No, I'm
Oh,
confused.
that's also including.
I think you
Catherine
could
Dink.
say there's a total of 2.5 new positions.
Wait, isn't Catherine Dinger's position new?
Yes, 2.5, including
So
her
Catherine Dinger's is new. The health inspector's new.
is a half.
Social services
I'm
coordinator.
sorry. And the public health nurse is half.
It's more that I'm saying you're adding, what you've got here is, and this gets to Dan's thing, fiscal 24, let's say you stop getting ARPA money for this.
Correct.
You're taking personal services to 3, Dan was excited to have us go from 150 to 130 on contractual. We're going from 70 to 340 grand. That's a big move for, I don't know if there's, going to be that demand for this going forward.
Yeah, I frankly think there will be.
And the overlap with the other divisions is just, you're going to be getting rid of them if we ever had a trouble spot anyway. All right.
All right, so 3.5 positions. Anybody else? Any other comments?
I would just ask Doug what positions he would accept from the budget and what he would do away with.
Yep. Doug?
What positions would I accept? I would probably say we could lose the half health inspector. I mean, I also don't know that I don't know that I'm trying to understand what the new position that they're creating for the grant, especially creating 2 years in advance of a grant funding. Why don't you wait? And if you've got the grant funding.
Can I respond to that one?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I just
sure.
think I would just, as far as the question, Amy, I don't know that Doug's run any human services departments, so to decide on that, on the person or the position or the whereabouts, but maybe on a financial basis, but a point taken, I guess, I assume we could defer to department heads. Anthony, go ahead.
Okay, that sounds good. So just to follow up, I think the health inspector was the first one. So currently, we're barely able to keep up with the minimum requirements for inspections. The problem being we have so many restaurants in Wakefield, but that's not the only thing they inspect. We have plenty of very complicated housing cases that we have to work on. Those take immense amount of hours. Those aren't straightforward cases where we can just go in once, issue an order and move on. Those are cases that require support. They have multiple issues. Whenever there's an issue, we have to go back and we have to re-inspect. If a place is condemned, we have to go back and we have to make sure that everything is back in order. It's actually a very complicated process. Unfortunately, just to say an inspector goes into a restaurant, spends an hour and comes back out is kind of a short-sighted way to look at it. The reason we need the additional inspector is to at least meet the minimum statutory requirements, if not, move towards a food safety program where we are working on prevention and education, which we've been lacking in the past. What I will say about the other position, that's the human services manager, Catherine Dingra. So the reason we are moving her out of the grant that she's currently on and advance by 2 years is because we're looking to expand the work that she's doing outside of just substance use prevention. Currently, that's her role and that's it. The position that we're creating within DFC, which is the community services manager, that one is to continue on some of the work that she's been doing with the youth action team, with the prevention groups, as well as food pantry. A lot of this work has already been put into place, and we need someone to run that and also to expand on some of those. She will be able to step outside of that role and work on other community health issues outside of substance use. And we already know for a fact that we're going to be seeing these issues increase, and so we're trying to get ahead of it. One of the things that was referenced earlier was the fire budget. And I think one of the reasons they were even asking for an increase is because of all the additional calls they've been getting. And I think these calls highlight the need that's going to be there well into the future here. We're not putting a timeline on 2 years and all mental health will be solved. In fact, we're going to say that right now, after we responded to a pandemic, I would say the real work begins. The recovery phase is more difficult, I would say, because we don't know a lot that's going on out there. We need to get a good grasp of it before we can actually tackle all of these issues. And so part of these positions is to do just that.
All right. I think we'll move it along if there's any other discussion that needs to take place. Thank you, Anthony. Okay,
Oh,
appreciate
sorry.
your time.
Yep. Jim, sorry, do you mind? We have Candace Linehan from the Board of Health. She's our chair of the Board of Health.
Sorry,
Do mind
thank you.
just a few
Yes.
comments?
Yep.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thanks, all of you. I appreciate it. Just wanted to support Anthony's remarks and say that the board fully supports this budget. And we do think that it supports efforts to foster recovery in our community and will allow us to rededicate some of our efforts to public health beyond COVID, supporting mental health, supporting food safety, supporting tobacco control, all of those things. So we think it's a thoughtful and a prudent budget, and I appreciate all of you taking the time to consider it and discuss it.
Very good, Candace. Thanks. Bill, you have your hand up?
I just have one last question. Anthony, thank you for your detailed explanations. Is this type of staffing benchmarked against any other communities of similar size? I mean, how do you come up with it?
Yeah, so when we looked at other communities of similar size, other places have recovery coaches already in place. They have social service coordinators already in their budget. I would say our department up to this point has overachieved. I think we've accomplished a lot of the work that is able to be done with a social service coordinator. However, it's not really sustainable because we are falling behind in certain categories. And some of those are due to COVID, right? Some of those are, but not all of them. I would say the health inspections, I don't see us having a dramatic decrease in food inspections in terms of restaurants that need to be inspected. We also don't expect a decrease in number of housing cases because we are seeing our population stay pretty level. And if they're, and if those housing calls increase, then we're going to have an increased number. So in terms of staffing and in terms of the positions that we're proposing here, they are in line with communities our size. And I think for those that aren't, it's unfortunate, but we have been trying to go above the minimum here, meet those needs.
I mean, I would just make a suggestion. I think some metrics that explains, I share Doug's concern about adding this many positions all at once. And I think metrics could have made this, a different discussion. So if you have them and are able to share them and, that Steve or Kevin or Jim Sullivan could share some data, for example, I don't know if you were listening to the fire chief was talking about how many more calls he's had, over time. I mean, I think it helps augment the story because this isn't something I'm going to tell you I'm familiar with, the work that's done. I don't know that any of us.
I can go over. So some.
Well, I think we probably need to move the meeting along, but it may be, I don't know if the subcommittee got any information about that because no minutes from the subcommittee have been shared, right, Jim? So
no, not yet.
So, I mean, those are the questions I would have been asking you if I was on the subcommittee. So maybe if you can share those back with the chair of the subcommittee such that by the time the minutes are posted, that we, the whole team here can have some visibility to that. I think that'd be really helpful.
Very good, Bill. It's a good idea. Thank you. I'll follow up with Steve and our Anthony. Ed?
Thank you. Thanks again, Anthony.
Just to reiterate what Bill said, I think metrics would be very valuable in this discussion. The only position I would question, as Doug would be that health inspector. I'd like to see some metrics on volume. How many inspections are done on an annual basis? What's the legal requirement for restaurant inspections? How many restaurants get inspected? I'd like to see some hard data on that to evaluate the need. That would be very helpful if that could be presented.
Very good. Got it. All right. Anthony, thank you. Appreciate your time. Candace, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is John still on?
I am here.
I know you are, John. I'm being a wise guy. Kevin, you want to go over the budget first, or John first? What's your pleasure? So we have general insurance, I believe.
Sure. Next two budgets, the general insurance and the workers' comp insurance budgets. We have John Spinello here tonight. John's the town's insurance agent. Does a lot of work with Steve and I on these budgets. First budget is the general insurance budget. We're recommending an increase to this budget of $38,706 over the current fiscal year. This increase breaks down $36,141 to the tax levy portion of the budget, $1,445 to the water division, $1,120 to the sewer division. This budget covers the town's buildings, motor vehicles, professional liability, cyber insurance. Also includes for this year's budget or next year's budget, an additional $1 million excess liability policy. The cost for that was $7,500. The total budget request for fiscal 23 is $499,131, with $459,166 coming from tax levy, $25,245 coming from the water enterprise, and $14,720 from the sewer enterprise. With that, I'll turn it over to John.
Good, thanks. John, good evening.
Good evening. So the excess liability policy, which I have done here for estimated for 7,500, I don't think it's going to be that much. But what happened in November was we sent out a certificate of liability insurance to Fort Devens, where the police do their firing range, and they changed their liability limit from 1 million to 2 million. Now, normally when we send out those certificates, most vendors just take it and they're fine with it, but they push back quite a bit on it. So I really don't want to buy an umbrella policy, which would go over all of our coverages. So we kind of negotiated with the carrier to just get a 1 million excess liability over our general liability policy. They quoted it in November at $2,800. Then I wrote the budget in late December. It came in January around $1,979. I think the price was. So, I think we're probably $1,000 or $1,500 high on that excess coverage. But it does go over all of our general liability, so it goes over all of our departments. So we do pick up some coverage. But quite frankly, I don't want the policy. I didn't want it 30 years ago when I canceled the umbrella, and we don't need it. I don't want it. But there was really no other way to get around that. The second part of this is, last year I put in for 4.5% increase, knowing that I probably wasn't going to get that, between the underwriter that I had, who they were looking for 8 to 10% increase. And I mentioned that at the finance committee meeting last year. And we had a really difficult time negotiating this until I got the vice president of underwriting, who I knew from 25, 30 years ago involved. And, he just said, we have marching orders to get at 8%. And I said, well, we're not going to do that. And we ended up taking this a little past a normal time of getting the quote. It was past Memorial Day, and we ended up at 6.5%. When I talked to them this year, they said, and things are a lot better in my business, my industry, on all of my renewals. So, we felt pretty comfortable with the 4.5. So you take the 4.5 and plus maybe 2% over the expiring from last year, and that's how we get at this increase that we have. So be happy to any questions up to that point.
Questions on the general insurance? Anybody? Good. Okay.
Next budget.
Yep. Go ahead. Thanks. Yep. Good.
Workers' comp.
Yep.
We're recommending an increase to this budget of $15,240 over the current fiscal year. This increase breaks down under the tax levy. The increase is $15,510. The water division decreased $2,865. The sewer division increased $2,646. And the MLD portion decreased $51. Total budget requests $487,780, with $436,500 coming from tax levy, $8,259 coming from the water enterprise, $8,848 coming from the SOAR enterprise, and $34,173 coming from the gas and light enterprise. With that, John.
Good.
So this budget really is made up of three components. One is our payroll, and our payroll normally increases about $2 million, 1.8 to $2 million every year. The second part is whatever the workers' compensation rates are at the time. They change every 2 years, and this year it comes up on July 1st. My cover letter, I mentioned that there was a 2.7% overall increase, but we get hit pretty hard on 4 of our heavy classes, and unfortunately, they're all on the tax levy side. So the highway department, the teachers, the cafeteria and custodian, and then our municipal employees. That really, kind of burst my bubble, if you will, because I knew we were going to have a very good year on the experience side. So the third part of this is the experience rating. We're at a 0.99. 3 years ago, we were at 132. So we're paying 32 points higher than the state average. Right now, we're paying one point less. I can tell you that is the first time in over 20 years we've been on the credit side. So I'm very happy about that. If it wasn't for the rate increase, we would be looking at a pretty good decrease. So last year, I asked our carrier for a credit when we had experience mods of 102 on small losses and 102 on large losses. I knew they would say no because they're scrutinized by the Division of Insurance on the financial side, so they're not going to give credit to an account that has debit mods. But I did ask them this year, and in January, they said they would take it to their board. I asked for 5, and knowing I'd probably get 2 or 3. They came back, gave us 3. So I rewrote the budget and picked up $15,000 there. Last August, they declared a $1 million dividend. There's 172 members that are in this self-insured group. 26 of them are charter members. We are one of them, and we were the first one in. We are also the largest of them. So I went to a conference in November thinking I'd pick up a dividend check. So that $1 million was supposed to go out to all its members. But the proposal to the Division of Insurance was a little more convoluted than that. They wanted to give some premium credit along with the dividend. They wanted to maybe give some to members that are no longer in the program and give something to the new ones. So my response, well, the ones that aren't here don't get it, and the ones that just came on don't get it. So they've been going back and forth with the DOI for 45, 50 days. And a couple of weeks ago, they said, well, we have it figured out, and you should have it by the 28th. So I thought I'd have it for Monday's meeting with council, but that didn't work. So there is a dividend coming. I hope it's just a plain dividend. I really not interested in any premium credit. So I don't think this budget will change significantly, but I'll just have to see what that is. I do want to point out, though, when I sent out the experience worksheets, that we have a 3-year experience period. So 2018, 19, and 20. In 2018, we had $295,000 of losses. 2019, we had $80,000. That was during the pandemic year. And last year, we had 203. So we're losing the 295 off of our experience rating. So right now, it's very surprising to me. We're at $60,000 with a fairly rough winter. And I assume some of that is because we keep people off the premises when it does have inclement weather. So if this holds, our experience modification won't hold at 60, but if it goes to doubles that or even triples that, we're going to have a significant decrease in our experience rating again. Right now, our trend is really positive, and it's the first time, and Steve will tell you, that's what I worry about all year long. I send them quarterly results, and I tell them, what's going on in terms of our experience rating, but we're in a really, really good trend right now, and I would expect that, we wouldn't hit, $200,000 in losses, and so I think next year will be just as good, so.
Yeah, I appreciate it as always. Great overview. Any questions? Doug?
Yeah, just one question on the pooled insurance plan. Like, are we concerned that we're the largest, or have we been the largest in the plan for quite some time?
We were their flagship back in 1991, so we've been the largest in there. We are actually represent 3% of their premium, overall premium, of the 172.
Okay, so it's not, we're not like 30, so that's good.
No, we're just 3%. So that's, I look at, well, it's $1 million, and I told them it should be a loyalty credit along with, whoever's the largest, gets the lion's share. So even 3% of $1 million is $30,000 the way I look at it, but we should get some longevity loyalty credits in there. And I still don't know what's going to happen. Something's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. So I'm hoping that we can send a check out. So.
Great. Anybody else?
Let's say John's been with us, what, 40 years, John?
Yeah.
40 years.
40 years.
I've been doing
Happy anniversary.
Thanks. A long time.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Good seeing
Thank
you,
you.
John.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
That completes the budgets, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
All right, so I think Doug or Steve mentioned the last meeting, we asked the schools to come in to give a little preliminary discussion. They'll be meeting with us down the road. Historically, we've had the schools come in, try to do 2 discussions with us, a little preliminary, and then again, the actual budget presentation to us. So, and I know Doug Lyons is with us and Christine, who can go over it way better than I, but the intent was them to give us an overview and be able to take some questions just as the beginning stages. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your patience.
Certainly, Jim, thanks. If you can give Christine the ability to share her screen, we can share some slides. We're going to move through our slide deck quickly, and there'll certainly be time at the end of our presentation for questions and answers.
Yep. Let me see. Host can do that. Steve, is that you?
I think that, yes. Christine, you should be able to share right now. There we go.
Wonderful. Can everyone see that?
Yes. Thank you.
So we have about 16 or 17 slides here. We've added some slides later today. We've cut some out from the presentation that we made last night to school committee to try to kind of speed things along. But we also added some information that we knew that you would ask about just based on feedback that we got from the liaisons that work with us. So our goal for tonight is just to share our budget priorities, share the information that we have gotten from our budget survey that we offer annually, and also our ESSER survey to explain what the priorities are, how that correlates to increase, and there'll be time at the end for questions and answers. So in the presentation that we presented last night, and we do this every year, we talk about kind of sharing our priorities. So next slide, please, Christine. So our priorities for FY23 budget is to really look at kind of the gaps that have been presenting themselves with students and classes. And so we're pleased to be back into a more normal schedule. Today was a big step for us. It was the first day that students came out of masks, or masking was a choice. So that was a step. But what we're seeing in our classrooms is really kind of gaps for kids. So that the time of COVID, the 20 plus months, 22, 24 months, has really kind of interrupted learning for a lot of our students. The range of needs, mental health needs, social emotional needs, and academic needs have really presented in ways where needs for students and how they're addressed in classrooms are really hard to do at this point because they're so vast. We've never seen kind of wider ranges of needs academically and socially, emotionally in these spaces during this time. So the next priority is to really look at kind of points of acceleration, because like we have some students that have needs for special education needs and intervention needs and mental health needs, we have other students that are thriving. And we really need to think about what we're calling points of acceleration, thinking about how we are challenging them and pushing them to continue to learn on the trajectory that they are learning on. So we're also looking at kind of the social emotional success for all students by retaining 2 adjustment counselors. Last year, if you were on FinCom or paid attention to the budget that was accepted, we had 2 adjustment counselors that were grant funded last year. And we know, we've discussed this very candidly about, funding positions through grants is dicey because you're negotiating a cliff, because funding goes away. And if you're looking at kind of having those positions stay, you have to have a plan for them. So last year, these 2 adjustment counselors that you see in the third bullet, we're moving from what was a grant funded position to the regular budget. We're also looking at adding 2 additional science teachers that are in line with both our survey needs. And these were contractually negotiated 3 years ago with the new teacher's contract. We pushed them out a year to delay the hiring of these positions because of COVID, but they are contractually, it's a contractual obligation for us. And we also think that it's not just a contractual obligation. It's really going to help students at the elementary as they transition to the middle school. More to follow on that. Support programs and special education needs to improve transitions is critical for us. And I'll say more about that in the coming slides. Next slide, please. So this year at the high school, this has been a priority for us for the last few years. With COVID, the ability to do this has really flattened, but we're kind of going to get back at it in a more aggressive way. Increased opportunity for dual enrollment. And what that means is when students are in high school, we want to create opportunities for them to have a college experience for really 2 populations of students at the high school. We want students who are first generation college attendees or college candidates. We want them to try to get in and experience college courses early. We also want our kind of most advanced learners to get, an opportunity to take college classes as well. And we're also looking at student internships. So, things that work well in college are being pushed down to the high school, and we want to be thoughtful about that and really create ways for students to kind of to get ahead in that way. So the notion of the next bullet is recruiting, retaining, and really kind of going after exceptional teachers and administrators, as well as paraeducators and staff to work in Wakefield. Something that is a real challenge for us, and I'll say more about this in later slides, is the same thing that is affecting all companies, all municipalities. There is a labor shortage. Human resources are at a premium right now. We used to post an elementary school job, an elementary teaching position, and we would get 350 applicants. Now, depending on the position, we might get 30 applicants, right? And so that is a real challenge for us. And it's the same with administrative positions. I'll say more about that. We're also looking to retain 4 additional full-time equivalents and two custodians and 2 nurses that we're thinking of a creative way to fund those positions in this grant. And we're looking at continuing our preventative maintenance that we've started with our DPW. And so COVID has changed everything in regard to how we maintain our buildings, how we work with facilities, and also how we collaborate with DPW. So the need for filter changes, the need for air quality tests, the need for to really make sure our HVAC systems in some of our buildings that are 40 or 50 years old are really difficult to keep running. But we're in a space now where that's what the standard is, and that's what we need to continue. We're also looking at, and I always kind of bring this up to FinCom and anyone that we're talking with our budget about is we're not just 7 schools, right? The Wakefield Public Schools employs 594 employees and in 7 bargaining units. And those groups serve close to 3,400 students and families, right? And so that's a critical piece know in regard to scaling up our budget. Because when you look at the number, it's such a large number. People think, my goodness, that's quite a bit of a percentage of the town budget, and it is. But we want to be really thoughtful about how we're thinking about that, talking about that, and how we're presenting it. Christine?
Great. I'll take the next slide. So we just thought it'd be really important to just outline how does this budget that we're presenting tonight compare to fiscal 22, which we're currently in. So fiscal 22 budget, when it was presented and voted on at town meeting, was actually reduced by $360,000. It was reduced because the town made a commitment to fund those positions. Those were one-year COVID positions from town funding from other grant-related sources. So our fiscal 22 budget was a little over 45 million, 45,343, 200. This budget that we're presenting, that we presented Tuesday night to school committee and that we're presenting tonight to you, is 47,607,077. So what does that break down to? It's an increase of a little over $2 million over fiscal 22. That equates to a 4.99% increase from 22 to 23. And we've broken it down to you in the three categories that we always report to school committee: personnel services, which are everyone on our payroll; contractual services; and materials and supplies.
Next slide, Buff.
Yep. Oop. Sorry, I hit too many buttons. So then we thought we'd outline what we're currently still paying in COVID-related costs in fiscal 22. So Doug talked about the two adjustment counselors, one at the middle and one at the high school. Those have been really game changers for those two schools. We've been paying for those from our grant, which is ending this year. We're also increasing our testing and our assessment services from the special education department. What we're seeing is when kids have not been in school full time, we really need to assess and test where they need to be. So that those services, in addition to finding places that will actually contract that can help provide those services, those prices have increased by about $65,000 this year. So this year we've also had 4 COVID teaching positions. So these are 4 of the positions that we talked about from last year that were funded by the town, that were one-year COVID teaching positions. So if students were quarantining due to being exposed to either COVID or testing positive and they needed to quarantine from school, we needed teachers that could actually support students while they were out of school, while they were in quarantine. So we had 2 at the elementary, 1 at the middle, and 1 at the high school. We have 2 additional custodians and the 2 additional float nurses this year that were helping us with testing and contact tracing. And Doug said the roles of our custodians have drastically changed over the last 2 years. And then we've also funded COVID-19 testing clinics for all of our staff this year to the tune of $35,000. So this year to date, and it's still in March, we've spent $699,000. Which we've offset with our ESSER 2 funds, which were about $376,000, which also ends this year. So what does that mean for 23?
So
we know that COVID isn't totally going away. What it means for our department in general is that we need to support those 4 positions that Doug was speaking about, the 2 float nurses and the 2 custodians. We're also looking to, because of the improvements we've made to our facilities in terms of air quality, HVAC, in terms of changing filters, higher quality filters, all of those costs have escalated over the last 2 years. So we've seen an addition in this budget that we're proposing for fiscal 23 for that for $117,000. So we're anticipating total COVID-19 related costs for next year to be $323,959, offset with the ARPA grant that Doug was speaking about. So we also have for fiscal 23 and 24, we have, so ESSER 3 is sunsetting in this fiscal year in 22. So our last ESSER 3, which was the Elementary and Secondary Emergency Relief Fund grant, will be spent. We're going to spread it over the next 2 years, fiscal 23 and 24. And when we applied for this grant, what we did was we had to do a budget survey. We asked the community, we asked families, we asked our staff, what do you think we should focus this $800,000 grant, which is only for the next 2 years, what should we focus that on? And the overwhelming response was in 4 areas: individualized instruction for students, after school and summer tutoring, and providing mental health services and supports. That actually, number 3 bullet, was a requirement from DESE. We had to have health services, mental health services in this grant. And then again, another portion to help to maintain some of the improvements in air quality in our school facilities.
So we talk about knowns and unknowns every time we present the budget. We know that direct instruction, intervention services, and counseling, they're now top priorities, right? Period. Not only are we finding this out, and not only are they coming out as kind of the top needs in our surveys, but we're seeing it in our classrooms. We're seeing it with our counselors in regard to the number of students that they're seeing and serving. We're seeing it in our after-school programs and the need for intervention for students academically. And that's not, I want to be clear, when I use the term intervention services, that's not a special education phrase or just for special education students. That's for all students. I can say more about that as we go through, and if you have questions, I'll be happy to address that at the end. Technology supports are critical to maintain kind of what we're doing. We've talked about a new student management system that we're bringing in. The student management system, which kind of houses everything. It houses all student information. There are modules for a student to keep track of student discipline. There are modules for health. There are modules for scheduling, as well as for IEPs and 504s. So there's kind of like a one-stop system to maintain all information for students and to run our school system. The system that we're using right now is called iPass. It's about 30 years old. It's like, I can't even describe how bad it is. We're essentially hand scheduling now. And when we have difficulty with the system, you call an 800 number and it's like calling the registry of motor vehicles. You sit on hold for about 30 or 40 minutes. And to think in 2022 that we're still investing in something like this by paying for a license year over year is crazy. So we're looking at really updating our system there. So these are knowns. In regard to unknowns, and I mentioned this earlier, the human resource challenge, as well as supply chain challenges are real. And like you all, we watch the news, we pay very close attention to what's happening globally. We pay attention to what's happening in the Ukraine. We watch what's happening to our gas prices, and we are looking at the economy very, very closely. But we're also seeing how it's impacting us. The ability that we used to have 2 years ago to get support or get help in regard to hiring personnel has changed. The landscape has changed. In regard to the personnel that we currently have and their ability to go work in any number of places and make more money than they're currently making in the Wakefield Public Schools has changed, right? So the first 2 bullets around unknowns are something that we will continue to talk about and work with our liaisons to really think about how we might innovatively address those challenges. But there are going to be challenges that we need to address, and I know it's going to affect the town side as well. So the other piece is kind of just really assessing the Special Education Stabilization Fund. We have appreciated the stewardship and kind of the leadership that FinCom has provided for us in not only creating the Special Education Stabilization Fund, but keeping it funded. We are not anticipating a need to access the Stabilization Fund this fiscal year, but we are also keenly aware that we are down $230,000 from the amount that the fund was designed to be at. And Dan Sherman might be able to say more about that, but we'd like to, if possible, maybe refund the stabilization fund in the fall if at town meeting, if possible. And the other question is meals. The government has made meals free for all students in FY22. The question is it going to continue in FY23? We don't know that yet, and we don't anticipate finding out until June or July. So I included this information. I want to be quick with this, but in regard to our surveys, we do a budget survey every year. This year we did an additional ESSER survey, and kind of the first line here, number 1, if you read horizontally across the slide, these are the priorities that were listed. The reason why we've listed a kind of a number 2 is we want to start to look at our priorities with budgeting year over year, and how we might address those needs, similar to the way capital does. They have a first tier, a second tier, and third tier. We don't want to lose sight of what is a second tier priority, and how might we be kind of creative in funding second tier priorities. And so we can talk more about that, but I just wanted to provide this slide just for context. Again, in regard to participation in these surveys, we've had close to 1,400 participants in those 2 surveys. So this year in FY23, we're proposing 2 science specialists, as I shared earlier. We're sharing that as I shared earlier, we're looking at making the 2 adjustment counselors that were grant funded last year, one at the Galvin and one at Wakefield Memorial High School, part of the regular day budget. And if you'll notice in our last slide, in tier 2, kind of mental health and counseling needs was a tier 2 need. We're thinking that this hire meets what is a tier 2 need, and we're going to continue to look at that year over year. We have a student coming into Doyle that needs a one-on-one para-education support, and that is a part of student IEP. Those are kind of an entitlement that we need to provide, and we also we're looking at in this budget to support 4 special education personnel positions for Doyle Elementary as well as middle school. One of the things that we need to do is to build programming that can welcome students as they move from elementary to the middle school. Right now, for example, there are students in what we call our ASD program, our autism spectrum program, and we have students moving to the middle school. We need to build a program that can accommodate the students and their needs at the middle school. So that's requiring us to kind of shuffle around some staff and to kind of move rooms around. And so, but those are things that we need to provide for students. They are entitled to that support and the continuation of programming. If we did not provide that, the students could go out of district at a cost 3, 4, or 5 times what it would cost to fund these positions. So that's just something to create a context. We talk about special education all the time, and we're asked all the time, do we consider thinking about investing differently or building programming differently to keep students in district to save money? And the answer is always yes. And this is an example of that. Next slide, please. So this year, what's unique in our budget is that we're seeking support of the town with our 2 custodians and our 2 float nurses. So these positions were funded, they were grant funded last year. We're looking to have them grant funded again this year through ARPA. And so we feel like it's in line with what ARPA allows, but this would allow us to kind of offset some of our costs in our budget and also make these positions 1-year positions, which I think is part of the new landscape now. I do think making positions 1-year positions, which require us to really account for their need year over year if we're going to need them, and also be thoughtful about how they're going to be funded when the grant goes away. I use the example of our adjustment counselors. That's an example where we're not looking to leave people in a grant cycle. When the grant goes away, we're looking to move people into the regular budget and to do it over time to offset costs. So there's not kind of jagged spikes or cliffs in the budget. So that's where we're at, and that's what we're requesting for these positions. Next slide.
Great, I can speak to this. So we just thought it'd be important just to highlight. So we are proposing a 4.99% increase tonight over 22, but we also just wanted to highlight, what does that mean for the governor's budget that came out in January. It gives us the first snapshot of what Chapter 70 funding was going to look like for the town. Chapter 70, as you all know, is the major program of state aid to help fund public education in all towns and cities in the Commonwealth. So over from 22 to 23, it's estimated so far with the governor's budget, a 14.5% increase, almost $1 million of Chapter 70 funding in Wakefield. So we just thought it'd be important to highlight that. And I also know we're so fortunate to have budget liaisons from FinCom that join our Finance and Facilities Subcommittee meetings. And we were kind of discussing already the budget document. I call it the budget book. It's 64 pages. It's online on our website. That kind of totals by school and department what really the breakdown is. And in our budget pages on page 52 at the summary level, what we do is we provide 2 years of actuals. So those are the two columns on your left of what actual was spent in all of those categories. And then the next three columns are fiscal 22 budget, proposed 23, and then the change between 22 and 23. And I just like this page because it summarizes the actual budget requests by school and category. And all of those offset numbers from circuit breaker down are true revenue offsets for Wakefield Public Schools. So you'll see that we prepare all funds, what the town appropriates to the schools, but we also present a budget that shows all revenues that are coming to Wakefield Public Schools and what that offsets. We're fortunate to have almost $1.7 million of circuit breaker reimbursement that help fund our out-of-district tuitions. That also with our grant and revolving accounts fund well over $4 million of salaries. So that with our revolving, we get some revenue from our Reading program of the Post Academy from Reading Public Schools. And then the town reduction offset for those $300,000 of positions. But what we're showing you is without those other revenue sources, our budget request would be well over $52 million in order to provide all those services that we're able to. As Doug said, we're always looking at grants. We're always trying to put as much services on those grants, but between our grants and our revolving accounts, we fund over 70 positions on those, from our food services, from our special education grants fund about 30 paraprofessional positions. So we're really conscious of making sure that all revenues are represented in this budget. In the last slide, we just kind of also summarize the last page of the budget book. It just also highlights what we were talking about, the actuals by school and by district-wide programs with the last 2 years of budgets. And then what I have to always report to the state, DESE asks us to report by function code. And this is important because, as Kevin knows, Kevin Gill and I, we prepare an end of year report and everything is about function code. They want to see where Wakefield is spending their money, whether it's in district leadership. What does that mean? It means central office. It means technology. It means human resources, things of that nature. And then instructional services. Anything in the 2000 series is direct instruction to students. So that's all teachers, all paraprofessionals, all occupational therapists, OT, PT, and those type of services. Student services are things, athletics, intramurals, transportation, things outside of the classroom, but are still direct student services. Operation and maintenance, these are things that actually make our facilities run, and utilities and technology as well. Fixed charges, this is things that we have in the school district, including our crossing guards and things that are supporting of our schools. And the last 9,000 series is how we categorize our outside placement. So as Doug was talking about, when we have to place our students that require special education services outside of Wakefield, what this is not, that the $2 million is outside of the circuit breaker funding. So I just thought that was a good page to highlight. So that's it for our slides. We just thought we would highlight, this is basically a summary of the slides that we presented to school committee on Tuesday night. But it was really an overview for you to get an idea of how this budget is in respect to fiscal 22. And I guess we'll just take any questions.
All right, very good. Appreciate that. Anybody have questions? And for those that are new, again, we asked the schools to try to come and give a preview. Sometimes when they came once, historically, it was more of a marathon and more of things people weren't aware of. So this helps a little bit to give you an overview. The schools will be, Doug can go over the calendar, but they'll be back to see us at the end of the month. It looks like on the 31st, and they go to present to town council that same week as well. So Dan, you have a question?
I do, thank you. Actually, more of a comment. I really appreciate that presentation. I think this is probably the best that I've seen recently from the school department in terms of where the money is being spent and anticipated to be spent. And so I really appreciate what you guys put together here for tonight. Very, very helpful. The other thing I was going to mention, I'm glad to hear that the special education needs for 22, you won't be tapping into the reserve fund. And maybe this is a question for Steve or maybe Kevin, but Doug mentioned getting it back up to what we think is a more appropriate level in the fall. Is there any thought of doing it in the spring, or is it definitely a fall operation to see how we close out the year and then decide how we can add to this the special reserve for SPED?
I think I'd prefer the fall, because again, we won't have a state budget by the time we go through ours. I don't think the state will pass their budget until June. We won't know new growth for a lot of the reasons we've talked before. I'd prefer the fall.
Yeah, I figured as much. Okay. Thank you again. Well done. Thank you for the school group for your presentation.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Doug Butler.
Sure. I just want to say this is my first year being on the school subcommittee. I think the one thing that is fantastic, and granted, we couldn't do it with the other budgets, but they do a fantastic job of leading up to this time. They're meeting every week or every 2 weeks as a subcommittee of the school committee doing the finances. So again, one of the reasons why you don't have a report from us with like minutes of what we do with the leadership of the school department is that we're actually sitting in on those meetings, and it's been really helpful, I think, for Jim and myself, and for Brian as well. And I'll speak for Brian and Bill. But I think Christine and Doug have done, are doing yeoman's work. And oh my God, how long are those school committee meetings? So they've done a really nice job of framing it, and the things that pop out there seem to be very, well equipped to answer. So feel free. They're not here officially, so you can sharpen your sticks and the pitchforks for the end of the month. But I think they did a really nice job of putting this budget together and in a sane and reasonable fashion.
Very good, thanks. Bill, you have comments?
I just want to echo what Doug and Dan have said, and for those of you who've been on the committee, for a while, this is much more concise, digestible, and I don't miss the 50 or 60 page PowerPoints that we've sat through in the past. So, thank you.
Well, I think you can thank Doug and Jim for that, because they've asked us for the can we please make it a little bit more concise. So I think your counterpart.
This is Brian. I'm just going to say that I long for the days of the 50-page book personally.
All right, so what I will say is I don't take any credit for that. Doug's the chair of the subcommittee. He's done a great job working with the other Doug and Christine. So appreciate the efforts. And, you know, for the size of the budget relative to the overall town budget, it's obviously important, and the groups working good together. And Doug can speak, or Christine can speak, but the 60-page book, Brian, is out now on the website. I downloaded it today. So town website, school website, you can find the book. It's there, and it's as riveting as it has been in the past. I did scan through it a while today, and I have a lot more work to look at. But again, the school will be formally presenting at the end of the month. I welcome any comments or questions you want to make. I just want to be clear. And I think next week you have a public forum as typical, Doug, right?
We do. School committee next week will be starting half an hour ahead of the usual time. So we had a meeting this past Tuesday. We'll meet next Tuesday, the 8th. And that's for public participation, but we're going to start the meeting at 7, and public participation on the budget will start at 7:15.
Very good. Any other comments? All right, encourage you to get the book off the website. I don't think Christine has money in the budget anymore to create the books for us like they used to, but it's available, right?
No, but if anyone wants to stop by the office, we could print it out for you if you wanted. We
$9,000 we saved in printing costs.
Right. We found that no one really wanted it printed, but thank you.
All right, good. Appreciate you both coming. I know you have a busy schedule as always. And Tom, thanks for jumping in, joining us. Appreciate it. All right. That's all we have for schools for right now. Again, thank you.
Thanks, Christine.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Be good. Committee comments. Anyone?
Mr. Chairman, do you want to jump back to item 2 on the library budget subcommittee meeting vote? I think you have minutes. I think you have.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Thanks for the reminder. Yeah, so we were looking at minutes earlier, and there wasn't a quorum on the subcommittee. There is a quorum now. So Dan and/or, sorry, I don't have it in front of me. Who else was on it?
It's me. It's me.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm looking to see if anybody wants to make a recommendation or to approve, review the minutes from the library subcommittee.
Yes, I move that we accept the library subcommittee meeting minutes of January 26, 2022.
And I will second that motion.
Thank you, both of you. Any discussion? All those in favor of the library subcommittee minutes from January 26th?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Well,
Motion carries.
I think it should just be the two of us in terms of.
You're right, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was ambitious at the 11th hour here, sorry.
All right.
It was
I think
unanimously approved.
I think Steve would have got it right.
I would have got it right.
All right, committee comments, anyone?
Jim, I just have a couple of observations I'd like to make.
Yeah.
You know, for me personally, when I look at, you know, when you send out the package in advance of the meeting, I think it'd be really helpful if people submitted their subcommittee minutes prior to, you know, us sitting in front of them, listening to the budget presentations, because that gives me, when I see that, a flow of what questions were asked, how were they answered, what was the thinking of the people on the committee. So, you know, I think it would have been helpful for a couple of the budgets that were presented tonight if we had had the subcommittee meeting minutes that we could have reviewed prior.
Yep.
I don't know if that's something, you know, in the future that could maybe be like almost a policy of this, of the FinCom, that that the minutes, you know, need to be presented and available from the subcommittees prior to the groups coming in.
Yeah,
and so I want to make that observation. For me, it's helpful.
Yeah, I was going to echo that, and maybe at a minimum, draft minutes if they haven't been approved yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least see some draft minutes ahead of time, because I think Bill's spot on there. That would have been helpful.
And the other thing, disagree at all. Go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
Okay. The other thing, you know, I think I said it, but I really feel like I want to say it again about the Board of Health. And, I asked a question about benchmarking metrics and things like that. I'm no expert to be able to say what the town needs or doesn't need. I don't purport myself to be like that on a lot of these things. I certainly have a lot of questions, some I ask and some I don't ask. But I know, and I'm one of probably the only lucky one in these ranks here to be retired, but I could never bring forward a budget to add headcount like this without having some substantial justification behind it. It would include metrics, numbers, reasons. And I think that could have made it for, a better overall presentation for this team if we saw some of that type of justification. So I would just offer that out, whether it be in the subcommittee or whether it, be coming from the board itself or, Steve, Kevin, I just would make that suggestion to you. That, it's adding a lot of headcount. So I didn't find the reasoning at all compelling, what was spoke to tonight. However, I'm no expert in this stuff. I don't know what other towns do. I don't know all the work that they do. I don't know all the things that they handle. I don't know how many cases they're involved with. So that could have really helped me understand the need. So I just make that observation as well.
Yep. No, I agree. It was a great suggestion. I think it might have been from Dawn, but whoever said it or you did, Bill. Yep.
Was there any questioning from town council? I didn't find that out. Did the town council have any issue with that budget? Steve?
They had questions, passed it 6-1. Let me pull it up so I can see my notes.
Gosh, I wonder who the one was.
And Dana, he did ask for kind of a running tally on, what happens in the future. How many cases were looked at, things like that. Metrics for next year, really wanted them brought back next year. And that was probably the main question.
Again, I would have said metrics to justify the position to begin with,
Right.
Well, I was asked what was said.
No. I appreciate that. Thanks for listening.
Okay, anybody else? Bill took a little of my thunder. I was going to reiterate the fact that, we do want some sort of minutes from the subcommittee meetings. Particularly, Doug explained a little bit on the school committee where we sort of meet multiple times through the period. And so for those that do chair, it may not have been completely explained in the past, but it's a great point that Bill brings up. If you're chairing a subcommittee or together the subcommittee, we want to have some sort of minutes. Doesn't need to be a novel, but we need to get some highlights and it's helpful. So appreciate that. Next meeting is going to be Wednesday, I think. Steve, is that right? 2 weeks?
Wednesday, the 16th. I would have heard from some of you that would like to meet in person. Trying to figure out a room that is conducive to that, because although we could use the second floor conference room, I don't think that it would film well, just because of it's a stationary camera. It's not a big room. I can't move it around. In the first floor conference room at Town Hall, be the same thing. I'm going to talk to WCAT about using their studio. So I wanted to maybe take the temperature and see if people would like to do that and meet in person or continue with Zoom.
And again, the reason that we need to change what we used to do 5 years ago is you're trying to have it filmed, because
I think
our meetings.
I think we found that everyone likes seeing us all on TV. They have nothing to do. So every committee is available on the town website, including all the subcommittees that have gone on Zoom. So.
Okay.
But let me know what you want. I mean, I'll talk to the WCAT. I think we could modify the studio to, you know, and we could have a hybrid, so people could come in if they
Half
wanted
and
to.
half, whatever.
Remote.
Yeah.
Remote, yeah.
All right, I mean, it's obviously a challenge for the board this size. You know, the room we always worked in was a big and crowded room to begin with, so.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be inclined to be face to face than not, quite honestly, that's my opinion, but. We've all gotten accustomed to Zoom as well. Next meeting would be DPW and articles. So FYI on that, and there's a couple of more meetings to follow before we, at the end of the process, we sit down and vote on all of the budgets that you've seen through the cycle. So.
And town meeting will be May 9th, going back to Monday, Thursday.
Jim, who's the
Monday.
DPW, who's the DPW subcommittee?
It's myself, it's David, and it's Dennis, and it is
Stefan.
thank you, Stefan.
Okay,
And
thank you.
we're endeavoring to meet one day next week. We really haven't had any substantial discussions with DPW.
Thank you.
I believe the upstairs at Harrington's would also film well.
Yeah,
I think that'll be after, at least.
yeah. Just not Thursday, the 17th. I don't recommend
Right.
it.
Exactly.
Although you might find me there, not on camera. Anybody else comments, committee comments? All right, I don't know what happened. When I wasn't here, the meeting was an hour and 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm here and it's 9:20, so you guys can figure that out. But I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second,
Second.
Don seconded.
Who seconded it?
Don did.
John did? Okay.
Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your time.